Well, with no further ado, Yishai,
Yes.
I want to talk with Chezi Goldberg. He's a therapist in adolescents and families in crisis here in Israel. He has a lot of experience with new immigrant teens that come here. It's a very difficult period, teenager years in any country that you're in, magnified a bit when you're coming to a different culture where teens have a little bit different values and different language, different teachers, different style of teaching, and we've got a little bit of changes that we have to think about when we're coming with teens. So, welcome to the show, Chezi Goldberg.
Good. Thanks for having me. I'd like to exaggerate for the purposes of helping people understand reality. It's not, you said something very valuable. It is, any move anywhere is tough. You move from downtown to Toronto to Thornhill, Toronto, Ontario, it's traumatic on the family. You move to a different state or a different country on the same continent, it's more traumatic. You move from America to Pluto, which is what I call the move to Israel.
Yeah, no atmosphere there.
It's very, very difficult. It's not a little bit different in culture. It's a lot of it different in culture. It's a language. It's words like yalla and how to do the resh and knowing what people mean when they give certain hand signals. It really is going to a totally different place in time.
What hand signals are you referring to?
Well, we're on the air, so we'll have to use our imagination. But
no, because
you hitchhike in America?
Yeah.
You don't do that here.
No.
And when you're standing at the tramp yard to go to Gush Etzion, depending on how you hold your hand, lets you know if you're going to the right towards Beitar, Tzur Hadassah, or Beit Shemesh, or to the left towards Efrat and Hebron.
Right.
Right?
But
little things along the way that if you're standing somewhere and you've never been through it before, it takes you time to learn.
The key hand signal, though, is when you put your thumb together with the rest of your fingers, when the tips of all the fingers meet, and you shake it a little bit, and that means hold on a minute, 1 second, rak rega,
right.
1 minute.
Or the one where the kids get off the plane, they already start with this twitch in their shoulder, and you think they've got a tick, but really they've just learned to become Israeli.
Right.
But the truth of the
like
matter is,
this,
we can laugh about these things, right? We can laugh about these things.
That's because we sat with shrinks for a long time.
Well, okay. But, as adults, we can laugh about it. Kids need to belong. So even if you take a kid within their own neighborhood and they move to a different neighborhood within their city, where kids come from a different, money stratus, or they go from one hashkafa shul to another hashkafa shul.
Hashkafa means world outlook, Weltanschauung.
Right. If they go from a modern Orthodox shul and the family becomes more to the right and they go to a more yeshiva shul. So even there's nuances. So kal v'chomer, even more so when a family moves to Eretz Yisrael, to Israel, and they're really getting used to nuances and they don't understand them and they don't feel free to ask, what does that mean? Because, number one, you don't want everyone to know that you're new on the block, even though they can tell by how you speak and your miftah, your accent.
And what kind of clothes you're wearing.
Right, exactly. And on the other hand, you don't have the language to do it. So you don't have the entrance ticket to come in and easily say, what does that mean? Right? It's a catch-22. It's very, very hard on kids. Parents, I think, it's funny. I just spoke at the Nefesh conference, and I said, one of the number one lies that the Aliyah Shalich tells people when they make Aliyah is, your kids will have an easy time. I don't think that's true. I think, in fact, kids can have a harder time. Why is that? Adults make a conscious decision, or an unconscious decision, to make Aliyah for idealistic reasons, religious reasons, not for financial reasons, right? We're going to make Aliyah because it's important to us. It's important for our children. Kids, no matter how much you involve them in the discussion and how excited they get, they're really going along for the ride or being dragged along for the ride. So parents, at some level, even though things are tough, make a decision. We're going to go through these changes and these tough times, and it's going to take us 5 years, 10 years, whatever, because we want to do it. We want to accomplish X, Y, and Z. Kids are brought into it, and it's almost, I sometimes imagine kids being dragged through it, and that, I think, is so key that parents have to be sensitive to the fact that it is hard for kids. They didn't necessarily have a choice, and so therefore it's that much more important to give them whatever support the kids need to make a successful aliyah.
Chezi, actually, my parents took me on Yeridah when I was 8 years old.
Yeridah, you have to say what that is.
That means when you move down away from Israel to someplace like the United States. So we moved to the United States, and I was put in 4th grade there. I had to learn English by sitting in like kindergarten classes with like little kids and stuff. And it was actually a very hard time in my life. My hair started falling out to some degree, and it took me from 4th grade till 8th grade to actually
acclimate
to the United States and to living there. And for a long time, it was very hard. I was an outsider. I was the Israeli, and I was all that kind of stuff. It was a really tough thing. And you know who helped me? Somebody that I went to, like the school counselor, the social worker, really talked to me and helped me kind of find myself through that time.
Well, it's interesting. I think you're touching on a very interesting point. I happen to have had a very rough week in my clinic with a whole bunch of news stories, and they're all happen to be this week families who've made Aliyah, whether it's 1 year ago, 10 years ago, or 20 years ago. And they're Olim, and their kids are having difficulty. And I heard it twice from two different new families who came in who said, if we just had gone for help earlier, it would have been so much easier, would have been so much wiser.
What is help? What is help?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure if you're asking what's the style of therapy that works the best, or what's the counseling people need, or what services to turn to.
I have a kid with an issue. I mean, I could see that he's not acclimating. He's not happy in his day-to-day. He's starting to show signs.
Well, then I think the step number one is not to send the kid to anybody. I think step number one is for the parents to go sit down with someone who's an outsider, a fly on the wall, who can sit and talk with them and hear their reportage on their son, his development, where they think things went wrong. And it could very well be that that person will never have to meet the child, but just because he's an outside objective opinion with a lot of experience in this area, that he'll be able to give them the right direction or pick up on the right nuance of what might have happened to get them getting their son the help. I think the main issue is that when parents see there's trouble with the child, the wrong thing to do is to wait too long. Sheva al tasa once in a while works. Sitting and not doing something to see how things work out is valid. But there comes a point where things start to escalate, or it's going on too long, and there's a little red light blinking on in the back of the parent's head that says something isn't right here, then reach out for help. There's services to call. There's professionals to call. And you know what? There's Olim who have made Aliyah, who have gone through a lot of what other Olim go through, who can also be of help. I'm amazed still. We made Aliyah, it's just now over 10 years, Baruch Hashem. And I remember when we made Aliyah, people saying, it takes like 10 years till you arrive. And then someone heard that and said, that's funny, I thought it was 20, and I'm on 25, right? And it takes time. And a lot of the things that everyone goes through are things that other people have gone through. So it could be, for example, that when you speak to families who've gone through, they say, and I turned to this service and they were great. Or I went to see this professional and he pointed me in the right direction. I think the important point is don't let it sit.
Right, and don't be embarrassed. Yesterday on the Janglo listserv, which is a listserv that talks to a lot of people here that are Olim, English-speaking Olim, it's a great list. Somebody sends out, like, my daughter is vacillating between anorexia and bulimia. Does anybody know how to deal with it? And
I saw that note.
I was very impressed by that because I thought, here's a person who, she just shared it with 3,000 people, but you know what? She's going to get a good answer.
Well, I'll tell you, it's very interesting. I saw it on the list, and I got 5 people who sent me and said, Chezi, what do you have to say? So I wrote back to all 5 people that in her request she said, my daughter doesn't want to go to a professional. My daughter doesn't want to go to a support group. What can I do?
Right.
So I wrote back, there's nothing to do because the daughter doesn't want help. Right. So you're right. On the one hand, it's a great resource to network with people.
Right.
On the other hand, I think that it's important to note, what's interesting is that the situation Olim have today is much different than before. For example, nefesh b'nefesh. When I made Aliyah, we came alone. We arrived in this big hall alone. It was just us and the sleeping clerk. We felt bad waking up because she was obviously used to hundreds of Russians coming at a time, and we came alone. Yeah. Nefesh b'nefesh, they come together. They come as a gush, as a group, and they continue as a group, and etc. You have ACI, you have Tehillah, and you have all these organizations now like Tfunat and Mask that are reaching out to parents who are having difficulty. It's really fantastic. So in that way, I think parents are in a much better position to reach out for help than they ever were before. On the other hand, I still think people get embarrassed. You touched on a really good point, not to be embarrassed. People still get embarrassed as if I'm the only one going through this. And if there's one thing you can say about Aliyah, other people are always going through it and have gone through it. Don't be embarrassed. It's expected. In fact, the professionals, the ones who are specialists in Aliyah, have a graph. They can tell you what the 3-month curve is and the 6-month curve, and it really does work that way. So the advantage of reaching out is that so many people have gone through it that on the one hand, there's just so many resources to turn to. On the other hand, I will tell you that a real fact is that depending on which profession you're looking for help, helpful direction from in this country, sometimes parents are still very much alone in figuring it out. In other words,
Chezi, we have to finish. I just want to let you give out your email address to anybody who wants to get in contact with you. If you're bringing in teens, you should know that they can have a very successful aliyah. My brothers came as teenagers, and today one is prosecuting the Supreme Court of Israel. He had a hard time when he first came here, but it's a few years of hard time, and they get with it.